Hey, do you want to read a story about kids going to a magical school in fantasy England? A story where our protagonist's mum is dead, one of his first friends is a smarty pants from a non-magical family, and the main characters become friends after they save a girl from being attacked by a troll? You're saying that sounds too much like Harry Potter? Well, what if I also told you that this school has a 20% death rate by graduation, encourages students to have premarital sex, has a magic system that feels reminiscent of the Fate series, and a general tone that feels reminiscent of Heaven's Feel. Have I piqued your interest yet? Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Reign of the Seven Spellblades. Let me set the scene for this story. The world of Spellblade is similar to our own Earth, but with magic, and set somewhere around the era of the Industrial Revolution, I think. The vast majority of the story takes place in the magical school Kimberly, which makes it a bit difficult to exactly place the era of the tech. Kimberly is built on top of an ancient magical labyrinth, filled with monsters. The labyrinth has multiple levels that get more dangerous each layer you go down, and the school actively encourages students to explore it. Also, they don't seem to mind students killing each other in the labyrinth, so the 20% death rate this school has is perhaps unsurprising. Our story starts in the dead of night. We watch as a girl gets ambushed by a group of mages, betrayed by her friend, and brutally murdered. Then, we jump to a nice sunny day with our protagonist Oliver walking by talking flowers on his way to start classes at Kimberly. He quickly makes friends with 5 other first years who become the core cast of the story. We have Nano, a former samurai hailing from this world's version of Japan. Her prestigious talent for combat and innate nobility is matched only by her complete lack of common sense and modesty. She quickly establishes herself as the main heroine, after Oliver finds her unashamedly bathing naked in one of the school's fountains. Next we have Guy, the son of magical farmers. Unsurprisingly given his background, he's down to earth, but also a bit hot-headed and stubborn. Following up is Pete, a diligent scholarship student from a non-magical family. He's Oliver's roommate and a member of a rare species, the male tsundere. Then there's Chella, a lady hailing from a distinguished magical family. She acts as something of an older sister figure to the group, and a voice of reason, except when she's crushing on Oliver. Lastly, rounding out the cast, we have Katie, the daughter of a prominent demi-human rights activist. She's incredibly kind, slightly naive, and has a strong sense of justice. That last point causes her some problems, given the Machiavellian attitude of the Kimberly staff. So, we have the setting and characters, but what's the actual story about? Well, Oliver does have reasons for attending Kimberly beyond just studying, but that would be getting into spoilers. So let's talk about some of the subplots instead. Beyond the typical school events, a couple others include alien invasion, demi-human rights, and twisted romance. Starting with the alien subplot, this story has a pretty interesting take on cosmology. In the story's world, each star in the sky is a tier, or in other words, a distinct world with its own laws of physics and ruled by its own gods. These gods would kind of like to control our world, so whenever they get the chance, they try to start so-called Gnostic cults and send creatures from their own world to invade. One of Kimberly's main purposes is to train Gnostic hunters to defend against said invasions, and this focus on combat is one of the reasons their curriculum is so harsh. Speaking of harsh, that's a great way to describe the second main subplot on demi-human rights. There are a number of intelligent demi-human species in this world, and mages seem to like enslaving them, hunting them for sport, and otherwise acting rather inhumane towards them. Katie is part of a movement which is trying to achieve equal rights for demi-humans, and her quest to achieve this ends up dragging herself and her friends into quite a few conflicts throughout the course of this series. The next subplot I'll be discussing has no shortage of conflict either. Romance in Seven Spellblades is complicated. Part of this is due to the fact that mages don't necessarily have the most healthy attitude towards relationships. Passing down strong magical genes is considered to be a priority, so there's lots of stuff about arranged marriages if you're from established families, trying to hook up with rare bloodlines if you're from less established families, and other magical eugenics nonsense. Mage sensibilities aside, the relationship within our protagonists don't make things any simpler. Oliver and Nano are into each other, but seem unwilling to take the first step. Chella is into Oliver, but respects his relationship with Nano, 99% of the time. The other 1%, she straight up follows him into a public bathroom to seduce him, in a scene that feels like it came straight out of a hentai. Katie seems to be into Oliver as well, but maybe also has a thing for Guy. And Pete may also have a thing for Oliver, too, but only under certain conditions. So yeah, there are some light harem elements in this story, along with a healthy dose of what the bleep. Now that I've established what the story's about, why would you want to read it? That's easy. Bludgeoning brawls on brooms. Think Quidditch, but only with beaters. A brutal team sport where blasting foes to the ground with a bat brings victory. Easily the best broom sport. In all seriousness and alliteration aside, the action in this series is amazing, and not just the aerobatics. Mage fights feature prominently in this story and incorporate not just magic, but also a thing. The mix of fast-paced sword fights and tricks and tactics from magic is enthralling. From one-on-one duels to team fights to battles against giant monsters, every scene is vividly described with nary a hint of power of friendship nor plot armor. It harkens back to the best of old-school Naruto or Hunter x Hunter, which, given that I have nostalgia goggles for both series, is quite some praise. Action aside, the author has done way too good a job getting me invested in the characters. Every single member of the main cast is quite likable and well developed, to the point that I'm far more invested in their personal subplots than where the main plot is actually going. The friendship between them feels quite tangible, and their personalities and their relationships mature and develop significantly over the course of this series. I am fully invested watching Nano find a purpose in life beyond battle. Pete come to terms with his identity, and Katie replace her naivete with competence and pragmatism. Honestly, I think the characters of this story have had far more personal growth in a few years of school than I've had in the past decade of my life. Likewise, I am fully invested in the relationships. While, as I mentioned before, Oliver does kind of develop something of a harem, all the characters act like normal people would in that situation, rather than a gaggle of accident-prone idiots. As such, while it's messy, it's not trashy, and watching that complex web of human emotions unravel is quite a treat, at least if you're into that kind of drama. It started out rather innocent, but has been getting a fair bit more serious, and I'll definitely be grabbing a bag of popcorn for some of the next stages. This next section is going to require a bit of spoilers for the end of the first volume. For anyone who wants to read this series completely blind, let me just say that I binge-read the first 8 volumes of this series in the space of a couple weeks and highly recommend it. Go off and read it now. For the rest of you who don't mind spoilers, on to the rant. So, at the end of the first volume, it's revealed that Oliver's mother was killed by a number of professors at Kimberly, and he's attending so he can murder them all. Seems like a reasonable revenge plot, right? Well, it has a couple of plot holes. Oliver has a secret society of upper year students helping him with his revenge, but it's never explained why they're helping him, or at least not on the first 8 volumes. With the exception of a couple family members, there seems to be no clear motivation for anyone else in the secret society. Also, if there are this many people aware of the murder, it's unclear why the first step wouldn't just be to report the perpetrators to the relevant authorities. It seems like that might be an easier way to get justice than asking a bunch of high schoolers to murder their teachers. It's not that this plot point can't work. Assassination Classroom is great. But, in that story, they exhausted all other options before sending in high schoolers to kill a supernaturally powerful teacher. It was not their plan A. That being said, even if these plot holes were fixed, I still wouldn't be a fan of the revenge plotline. As I mentioned earlier, I'm quite attached to the main cast, but whenever the revenge plot comes up, it sidelines everyone other than Oliver. Sure, there are other members of the secret revenge society, but none of them are really all that fleshed out. Any one of them could die and I wouldn't shed a tear since I scarcely know who they are. Oliver is not badly written, but he can't carry this plotline on his own. Finally, to be quite frank, the revenge plotline feels superfluous. Because the sections related to this plotline tend to be tacked on to the beginning or end of volumes, and don't include the main cast, you could easily remove them entirely from the series and still retain a coherent story. After the reveal at the end of the first volume, Oliver often seems to forget the revenge plot is even a thing, until it's time to morph his character into a masked edgelord and off the next educator. The assassinations themselves are entertaining, but less so for the setup and aftermath, and it would be no great loss if the whole thing was removed. As I noted earlier, I highly recommend reading Seven Spellblades. While I'm not the biggest fan of the revenge plotline, the rest of the main story more than makes up for it. If you've already read this series and are looking for something similar, I would recommend Ealdorman on the Sky, another great series by the author of Spellblade. Thank you all for listening to this video. Cheers!